Talks, I'm Cathy Yang, your intel on the Philippine markets and the economy. In the headlines, the Independent Commission on Infrastructure seeks more powers as it investigates anomalous flood control projects. Its investigation will be live streamed beginning next week. The Economic Planning Department says online gambling's huge social cost outweighs its minimal economic contribution. And the Philippine peso hovers to a near 9-month low. We check in with Ron Acoba, Chief Investment Strategist at Trading Edge. Starting next week, the public will get a front-row seat in the investigation on corruption in flood control projects. This, as the Independent Commission for Infrastructure, or ICI, announced it will live-stream its hearings. ICI Chair and former Supreme Court Justice Andres Reyes made the announcement during a Senate hearing on the proposed bill to create an Independent People's Commission.
We don't have the facility and we don't have the rules of procedure. But we will already shorten the procedure in spite of no rules allowing us. We will now go on live stream next week.
In the same hearing, Reyes also asked lawmakers to grant the commission more powers. He said the ICI needs access to bank and tax records, as well as text messages between officials and contractors to trace cash transactions and money flows. Meantime, lawmakers lauded the ICI's move to live stream the hearings. Bayan Representative Chel Diokno said it is the public's right to know what happens in the hearings since they are the direct victims of corruption. ML Party List Representative Laila de Lima said the people themselves will become investigators. Bicol Saro Party List Representative Terry Ridon agreed, saying it's an important transparency measure. The Supreme Court will still have to review the Sandigan Bayan's recommendations on how it will expedite the trial of cases in connection with the flood control scandal. Sandigan Bayan presiding Justice Geraldine Ekong had said that the anti-graft court is eyeing marathon hearings on the cases to render a decision in less than a year. Ombudsman Boying Remulla also said his office is considering the evaluation of the complaints in just 48 hours. Remulla also revealed that a former lawmaker from Quezon City has decided to cooperate and divulge information on flood control anomalies. He did not give further details, except that the person is ready to provide names allegedly involved in the scam.
Nakatanggap din ako ng tawag kaninang umaga, very early in the morning, isang kaibigan ko para siyang go-between sa isang congressman from Quezon City who wants to tell all. So, we'll wait. I will work on that.
Sir, anong tell all? Ano daw yung sasabihin?
Yung involvement niya sa lahat na nangyayari. Tsaka kung paano kalakaran, paano nangyayari lahat yan.
As corruption issues dig deep, one of the Philippines' largest food companies, CDO Foodsphere, says it is cautiously optimistic. CDO President and CEO Jerome Ong says as it gears up for expansion, CDO is keeping a close watch on developments in the government's corruption investigation.
We decided to be cautiously optimistic, Cathy. We are still optimistic, but we have our contingencies in place and we're not doubling down as much as we would like to. But being in an industry or being in an environment where our products are for the mass market and these are food products, people will continue to eat, and we have to continue expanding our capacity to meet the growing food consumption needs of Filipinos.
Resigned House Speaker Martin Romualdez denies having any ties with a convicted money launderer. A report of Malaysia-based news outlet Sarawak alleges that British-Swiss national Patrick Mahoney sat as an advisor of the Maharlika Investment Corporation. Mahoney was convicted last year for his role in an embezzlement scheme involving One Malaysia Development Berhad, or 1MDB. Sarawak reported that Mahoney met with Romualdez frequently while the executive's case was still on appeal. Mahoney supposedly traveled to Manila to advise members of the MIC. The law establishing the Philippine Sovereign Wealth Fund was passed when Romualdez was still the Speaker of the House of Representatives. In a statement, Romualdez calls the allegations, quote, unfounded, misleading, and malicious. The MIC has also previously denied links with Mahoney, calling the accusations false, baseless, and damaging. The Department of Economy, Planning and Development says the social impact of online gambling outweighs its minimal economic contribution. In a congressional hearing, DepDev Director Desiree Narvaez says the department supports the outright ban or stricter regulations of online gambling, given its significant social cost. In a data obtained by Business World, the electronic gaming industry contributed about 81.6 billion pesos, or 0.37%, to real gross domestic product last year. The Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation, or PAGCOR's gaming income was at 40.5 billion pesos in the first 9 months of the year. Though their full-year earnings, they said, could fall short of the 60 billion peso target due to the removal of e-wallets links to online gambling apps. Online gambling has emerged as a growing concern in the Philippines amid rising cases of addiction and other social costs. The Energy Department has ordered power generation companies to triple their mandatory contributions to host communities starting next year. Effective January 2026, the required allocation under the Energy Regulation 194 program must be increased to 0.03 centavos per kilowatt hour of power sales. This represents a 200% increase from the current 0.01 centavos per kilowatt-hour contribution made by GenCos and energy resource developers to their local government units. Under the new rates, the 2.5 centavos per kilowatt-hour contribution will be directed to host communities to support initiatives in livelihood development, environmental protection, healthcare, and education. The remaining half centavo will fund electrification projects that will link distribution utilities to households that lack power. Here are the headlines from around the globe. In the U.S., the Trump administration has imposed sanctions on Russia's two largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, urging Moscow for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine. The move came a day after plans for a summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin were put on hold. Trump said he felt it was time to act, but hopes the sanctions won't be on for long. The Trump administration is also considering curbs in software-powered exports to China, sources tell Reuters. The plan is meant to retaliate against Beijing's recent rare earth export limits. It would restrict global shipments of products containing or made with U.S. software, from laptops to jet engines. This is one of several options under review to implement Trump's earlier threat on critical software exports. And in France, 2 police officers will be stationed in nearby cells to ensure former French President Nicolas Sarkozy's safety during his 5-year prison sentence in La Santa in Paris. Sarkozy is convicted of conspiring to raise campaign funds from Libya. He will remain in solitary confinement with no contact with other inmates during outdoor activities. You're watching Money Talks. Catch our conversation with Ron Acoba of Trading Edge as the peso hovers to a near 9-month low. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. U.S. equities closed lower Wednesday as fresh developments out of Washington deepen investor concerns over U.S.-China trade tensions. The Dow fell by nearly 0.75%, S&P 500 down by 0.5%, and the Nasdaq slipped by about 1%. The benchmark 10-year Treasury yields fell for a third straight session, closing at 3.952%, still its lowest level since October last year. While gold extended its slide, settling at $4,044 per ounce, following its biggest single-day drop in 5 years in the previous session. U.S. futures are mixed ahead of the market open later tonight Manila time. The Dow down by about 0.2%. S&P and the Nasdaq are up 0.1% each. As for the Asian markets, it's trading lower this Thursday. Japan's Nikkei 225 falling about 1.5%. South Korea's Kospi slipping 0.4%. And Australia's ASX 200 sliding by nearly 0.25%. And a quick check on our own markets. The PSEI opens Thursday lower by about 0.1%, 6,024. Mining stocks took a hit Wednesday, dragging the local bourse lower as spot gold prices saw their biggest drop in 5 years. By the closing bell, the benchmark index slipped by over 1%, with most counters in the red. Taking a look at the Philippine peso. Looks like it opens today weaker, 58.50 to the dollar. Peso closed Wednesday weaker, 58.41 against the greenback. That's the worst finish in nearly 9 months, or since it closed at 58.66 per dollar on February 3. The decline came as traders awaited U.S. inflation data and tracked the plunge in gold prices. As for the 10-year government bond yields, they've edged up to 5.969%. Joining us now is Ron Acoba, Chief Investment Strategist at Trading Edge. Good to see you again, Ron. Welcome back to the program.
Hi, Ms. Cathy. Good morning, and thank you for having me.
All right, so given how unprecedented the event risks we've faced, not only this week or this month, but since the start of the year, from Trump's tariffs to the anomalous flood control projects, to what extent do you think did technical analysis really aid you in seeing the next bout of aversion in risk assets, like, say, stocks?
Well, technical analysis essentially is a good tool to use, especially by pinpointing specific levels of potential levels of support, potentials of level of resistance, especially, for example, when the market is just trading sideways. Because when you are trading sideways, the levels where the indexes tend to rebound is pretty obvious, right? For example, over the past few years, the index has just been trading sideways between say around 5.8 to 5.9 to a top of around 6.5, and we've pretty much just traded in a wide choppy movement in and between those particular levels over the past several periods. So the use of technical analysis allows us as traders and fund managers to pinpoint levels where we can perhaps buy, where we can perhaps take profits. And in my case, it actually helped me isolate individual names that may outperform the general market. For instance, while I've talked about that the index has just been trading sideways for the past several days, there were bright spots, right? That technical analysis allowed me to zoom into it. At one point, DG Plus was one of the best performers. We were able to pinpoint that because technical analysis allowed us to see where the start of the momentum would be, right? Recently, prior to the gold's decline, gold at 2,000, we were able to pinpoint that gold was going to start a trend following its movement past 2,000, and more recently, gold was going to again restart that trend following its movement above its previous trading range resistance at 3.4. specifically
show
to
gold, because I guess people
Yeah.
would understand what technical
Yeah.
analysis is all about. When you see that chart,
Yeah.
it's very clear that it's had a pretty good run up. And yesterday
Yeah.
was also a big marker because that's a near all-time high. But then we
Yes.
saw that drop, and it was a drop that you contextualized as being the single biggest drop in at least 5 years. So
Yeah.
what indicators do you go for next
Well,
to see
what-
where gold goes next?
Well, to give you context, talking about gold, from from August, from early August up to just a week ago, gold has had a massive run up of about 29%, coming out of that flat consolidation that you can see in the chart, where gold prices just moved sideways within a tight range between 3,200 to 3,400, I believe, for 4 months from around May to August, if I remember correctly, before finally gold was able to punch through that resistance, allowing it to surge to as high as 4,375, right?
Interesting that
But
you marked the lower part of this graph in pink.
Yes,
That's
yes,
the relative strength index. Is
yes.
that correct?
The
And you're seeing that it went to a level above overbought. In fact, it's
Yes.
quite rare that you say it's extreme overbought conditions.
Well, I mentioned extreme because the momentum indicator reached an overbought level, not just on its daily chart, but even if you switch it to a weekly chart, and even to a monthly chart, uh, the the momentum indicator we're still flagging an overbought condition, which warranted a trigger of an extreme overbought warning. Whenever you have that, it's actually the security is at a precarious level where it would likely either consolidate, move sideways, or pull back, which is again warranted because
And that's
prices don't.
exactly what we saw.
Yeah.
It did have a second day's pullback, but still well
Yeah.
above $4,000
Yes,
per ounce.
yes.
What do the indicators
Yes.
say now where it will head next, and when might be a good time to buy in?
Well, on its daily chart, the momentum indicator is now has cooled down a bit after reaching an extreme overbought reading. However, in its weekly and monthly time frame, indicators remain to be overbought. So its downward movement, at least in the short term, appears to have some more room to go lower. And relatively speaking, gold is trading still at above 4.4, and its high is almost I mean, gold as of now is trading at a little over 4,000, and its all-time high is 4.4. Let's say 4.4. That's just a little less than 10% decline relative to how it performed in the last few months of 29% since August and 60% since the start of the year. So let's say a 10% decline is just really normal volatility in my opinion, and actually warranted because of its massive run up
Right, right.
year to date
It
basis.
is, that kind of confidence you want to instill into
Yeah.
somebody who's just invested in gold and then lost 10%
Yeah.
of the money in just a single day. But there is a correlation as well
Yeah.
with the Philippine peso. We now see it at a
Yeah.
near 9-month low. And let's take a look at that chart, because it's very interesting that we're now approaching the possibility that it might breach 59. What do the
Well,
technicals say that makes you confident saying that?
Well, the common denominator between gold prices and the exchange rates is the U.S. dollar, right? Of course, gold is denominated in U.S. dollars. One of the key reasons why we saw a decline in gold recently is not just profit-taking actions amid its massive run-up since the start of the year, but also as investors now is tuning into the release of the latest CPI data in the US, which, based on estimates, headline inflation in the US is expected to have risen to 3.1% in September, which is actually the highest since May 2024. Of course, an increase in inflation would be positive or bullish for the US dollar. directly. That's why we see an uptick in the U.S. dollar in itself, and a decline in gold as of late. And going to the U.S. dollar peso exchange rate, the exchange rate is now again testing its 58.44 resistance level, the same level that it marked back in August. So if we see a 3.1 or even a higher inflation print in the U.S., that would actually trigger more inflows to the U.S. dollar, leading to a further decline in gold and leading an uptick in the local exchange
So
rate.
we're looking at a record low on the exchange rate then in the next
Yeah,
few weeks?
well, yeah, it's quite likely because now we're testing the 58.44 reaction high, which is its nearest or immediate resistance. Above that, it's already 59.08, which is its all-time high or all-time low for the peso relative to the US dollar. So it's quite likely that the peso will be headed that way, especially on the fundamental front, that the BSP is actually more keen in cutting its interest rates onwards to 2026 amid the potential slowdown in our local economy because of this ongoing corruption scandal.
Interesting you make a mention of the fundamentals or the lack thereof,
Yeah.
because as a technical analyst, you just focus on the charts. So how do you meld that then? Just going back to the PSEI, if we can just push up the chart again and talk to us from a technical standpoint, building in the fundamentals or the lack thereof. It's been down about 1.4% in the past month, roughly 18% compared to the same period last year. What does this descending channel now tell us on where it heads, given that we typically believe that there might be a Santa Claus rally by December?
Maybe maybe not. But based on how the prices are moving, at least from a technical perspective, is that it appears that the index may retest its recent low of around 5,550 as it encountered a resistance at the upper bound of its declining or descending channel, as you can see, which is at around 6,100 level. That 6,100 level is also in line with its 50-day moving average, where the index in the last 4 or 5 weeks also hit a resistance when it was doing a high of 6,200 before it pulled back. So it's quite likely that we will retest and continue to trade along that descending channel and retest our lows. Go
ahead.
In terms of fundamentals, before we get to the fundamentals, in terms of market breadth, in terms of the components of the index itself, actually the only reason why the index is trading at 6,000 and not 5,800 is because of ICT and because of Meralco. Why? Both ICT and Meralco are trading at new highs, and combined, they take into account about 20% weight in the index. While on the other hand, the 28 other names, specifically the heaviest ones like SM and Ayala Corporation, they are trading at the lows, right? If you look into the banking sector, of course, they also contain a big weight in the index. BDO, BPI, Metrobank are also trading at near their lows. If you look at the telcos, the next bigger ones, PLDT and Globe, they're also trading at their year-to-date lows. So in terms of market breadth, in terms of broad performance, it's actually only 2 stocks that are carrying the weight of the entire index, and that's why the index is at 6,000. Because if you remove the performance of ICT and Meralco, we will be at 5,800 automatically.
All right. Well, we hear you, and we hear those 2 stocks that are lifting the markets. Thank you so much for that deep dive. Appreciate all the learnings there. Ron Acoba of Trading Edge.
Thank you, Ms. Cathy.
In corporate news, Meralco has partnered with US-based firm Itron Inc. to support the deployment of smart meters as part of its grid modernization program. Under the deal, Itron will provide its advanced metering infrastructure solutions to help Meralco enable near real-time two-way communication between its operators and customer endpoints. The system allows faster power failure detection and restoration, improved billing accuracy, and better transparency in electricity use. The advanced metering infrastructure network will use an open IPv6-based system that combines mesh and cellular connectivity, supporting both smart metering and other smart grid applications. Global mental health and wellness advocate Dr. James Rouse, visiting Manila this week, gives us his advice on how Filipinos can thrive through the current collective trauma brought on by corruption and governance issues. Here's an excerpt of my interview with him.
I'd love to answer that in a way that I can from a person who lives in a country where we also have similar issues right now, America. What I tell a lot of my patients, and I tell myself this every day, and I would tell the people who I love here in the Philippines, there's something called self-efficacy, Cathy. And what self-efficacy simply means is that the brain and our emotions work very strongly with one habit. And there's a part of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex. It's a muscle where if we've got hard things going on, collective trauma, anger, we feel like we don't have a voice that's being heard. What we know from science is that when we wake up first thing in the morning, choose something that stretches you. Choose something that's hard. Like say, I don't walk in the morning, but I'm gonna start walking in the morning every morning. Here's why this matters. If you wake up in the morning and you watch the news and you get more collective trauma, more anger, cortisol levels rise. More anxiety, more anger, more pain, more all the things we don't want. But if you take a walk first thing in the morning and do it because you don't normally do it and it's stretching you, something you normally wouldn't do, the anterior cingulate tells the brain, be confident, be a leader of your own life, feel less stress and less anger because you have a different way that you are leading your life. And our brain reflects on different cues we give our brain, tells our mind, you're doing things differently. Now, does it change government? I'm a big believer that the more people who rise together in their own self-care and the way that places that we go every single morning to say, I'm finding a part of myself that I never knew I had. I'm finding courage. I'm finding confidence. I'm finding love for myself. I go out in the world and I become contagious. We have these things called mirror neurons, Cathy. If you take that walk in the morning and all of a sudden you're feeling this sense of hope, you walk out in the world, you go to the market, you go into healthy options, you're gonna have people look at you and they go, I don't know what it was about that person, but when I saw that person, I wanted to do things differently. It's called what they call emotional contagion. The most powerful countries, the most powerful political leaders really are the ones that give people the most hope. So if you say, I'm not a leader, I'm just a business person, I'm just running a company, you're not just running a company, you're running a culture.
Catch my full interview on Long Conversation Thought Leaders only here on One News. And that is it for Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Catch us again tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. Kapatid, we are One News. All the sides, all the time. Have a great day ahead.